Good afternoon, John. John Donovan.
How you doing, Marty Keller?
Doing well. Like to welcome you and everybody who's eagerly watching their screen to this latest edition of the Intentional Living podcast. This
Mhm.
is an opportunity for John and myself to discuss uh, the whole concept of breaking patterns of behavior that often feel compulsive. I mean, have you ever had the experience of um, feeling that something's making you do something and your mind is going, no, no, I don't want to do that. And you do it anyway.
Right,
Uh, or do you sometimes have the opposite experience where I need to get up and take care of this and your body just won't do it
right.
either way. So we have these compulsive behaviors as human beings that seem to originate from someplace inside ourselves that we can't put our finger on. And therefore we often feel helpless and mystified. So part of the intentional living podcast is to demystify behaviors.
Mhm.
And my friend John Donovan developed a process which we call the accountability practice, part of intentional living, as a way to make those seeming hidden behaviors conscious so we can become aware of them. And once we become aware of them, we actually have some choices. And we'll discuss how we can exercise that choice as well here in the Intentional Living podcast. So
Mhm.
we welcome everybody to join us today. Um, we'll, Before we started the podcast, John and I were talking about the power of emotion, and we want to explore this a little bit. And before we do get into the specifics of this, John, would you start us off by explaining to somebody who might be here for the first time where emotion fits into our accountability practice and why we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on its power and its usefulness?
Right. I am 36 years sober. I got sober 36 years ago, and I've been in recovery ever since. And my um, goal in going to a 12-step meeting or some kind of recovery was to stop a pattern of behavior that I found myself in: alcoholism, codependency, rageaholic, workaholic. And when I stopped drinking, I thought, oh, everything's going to be okay now because I blamed everything on the alcohol. And what I found is that I was left with myself, unable to break other patterns of behaviors that baffled me. When I first got into recovery, I heard the phrase, "This is a cunning, baffling, powerful disease." And it was cunning, baffling, and powerful because I find myself in a pattern of behavior that I know is destructive. I know I don't want to do the way I'm doing it. I either want to modify it or change it or stop it. And no matter how hard I tried to do that, I'd find myself back in the pattern of behavior. Um, and when I was working at the jail, I did a workshop, a 12-week workshop that I had to go to learn how to facilitate. And they talked about uh, the first step out is identifying where you're at. Like, I'm in a rut, I'm in this pattern, and just to simply own it. And then they talked about this mechanism they called the reticular activating system. And it's a net-like group of cells, and this is the brainstem, midbrain, that permeate this brainstem and midbrain that alert us to danger. Um, and in the example of wanting to stop, whether it was rageaholic or workaholic, um, this and I found that I couldn't change the behavior. I would scream, yell, swear up and down 1 minute that that's not okay for me. I'm never going to do that again. And then 10 minutes later, I'm screaming and yelling again. So the the brainstem is hooked into our memory, conscious and subconscious, and it processes everything going to your brain, rational brain, moves through the brainstem first, um, and through the emotional processor. The reptilian mind is the brainstem, instinctual. The mammalian mind is the where we learn to process feelings and emotions, feelings. And when I say emotions, feelings, I'm referring to the same thing. And we break it into two parts. The emotion, we call it happy, content, afraid, sad, hurt, afraid, is like a sense we get from our environment. The feeling is the reception of the emotion, of the energy in the room. So the emotion is my ability to pick up the energy in the room. Um, and then the feeling is my receiving this energy, it's invisible energy. I have five senses: see, hear, taste, touch, smell. And I'm not talking about the five sense touch, which is feeling. I feel I'm smooth or rough, feel cold or hot. That's um, sensing something external from me, tactile, objectifiable thing. The feeling emotion alerts us to energetic things that we can't see, hear, taste, touch, smell, that are important to our well being. One of the phrases I use a lot is the phrase, when you entered the room, you could cut the tension with a knife. Okay, that's us picking up the tension through our emotional feeling body. So we sense, feel pretty much at the same time. So the same thing. The feeling is a frequency, it's a vibration. And I sense it in my body. That's how I am aware of emotion, the feeling tone, a sensing of a shift in vibration or a particular tension that may be in the room. Everybody in the room, their face is smiling, everything's okay, but there's something underlying that nobody's talking about that I can sense, feel. I do that through my emotional feeling body. Um, I was taught as a young man to dismiss that emotions, feelings um, are a sign of weakness. Like they attach emotion and feeling to crying or being upset or I'm gonna say flying off the handle, which have which have nothing to do with the emotion. That's the behavior after we receive the information.
And after we have the sensation in our bodies.
That, and we were trained to dismiss the sensation, go to the logical. Well, if nobody in the room is showing anything, then I must be crazy or I'm making stuff up. And that's what I was told as a child. No, no, you didn't feel that. Oh, you're incapable. You're stupid. You're whatever the projection onto us was. We learn to disassociate from that sense. You might even call it a sixth sense. Um, and then I grew up in that, being estranged from my emotional feeling body, to get to 39 years old and then ask for help because I couldn't stop drinking. I just, and I knew I needed to. It was life threatening. It was getting to the point where it was life threatening. And that's where I found the 12 step room. So, um, the emotional feeling part of myself that I dismissed was my access to information that's important to me so that I can move to fulfillment and not just get it right, be a good boy, do the right thing, don't look stupid. And I lost that um, guidance system. So now I have to re-familiarize myself. What do you mean emotional feeling? Um, in the intentional living material accountability process, we access that emotional feeling part of ourselves through simply stating the truth of where we find myself. Like, I have difficulty with alcohol. Oh, I'm an alcoholic. In that statement of truth, there's a sense in my body that I feel of truth. And it's subconscious, it's below my consciousness level. I can talk about it, but I can't really explain the sense I have. And the sense I had was one of relief. My name's John, I'm an alcoholic. Uh, oh, what just happened? Validation, that true statement of whatever happened to me as a child that motivated me and my choices to move to drink and stay drunk. Okay. That's a validation of feeling tone.
So you're basically talking about, excuse me, I'm sorry. You're basically talking about the first time you owned that,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And it was in an AA meeting. It's probably my third meeting. First two meetings I was there because somebody thought it was a good idea for me to be there. In that third meeting, when I decided to identify myself as an alcoholic, and I heard me say, "I'm an alcoholic." That was the truth of where I was. I was out of denial. I was out of blaming. I just owned the fact that I'm an alcoholic, not blaming anybody, not making myself look bad, just truth. Connected me to this emotional field or sense, and I felt relief. What I've come to understand was that true statement and the accompanying feeling tone was a validation of my subconscious trauma that I didn't know how to articulate, pre-verbal, nonverbal. And it validated whatever happened to me in those beginning years and preteen, teen, 20s, 30s, 40s that I didn't know how to express. And then I heard myself think, I didn't say anything, I'm coming back to this place, which was the first time I ever thought I didn't want to be there. After making that true statement, feeling what I felt, which was validation, I didn't know how to name it back then. I just felt relief. The first I'm coming back, and I haven't stopped going back. Of course, I go to adult children of alcoholics meetings and several other meetings too, but I haven't stopped going back since because I see the value in whatever happened to connect me to my emotional body. Okay. Since then, I have come to understand that whatever I call my feeling, like afraid, hurt, sad, excited, doesn't come close to really speaking the truth about whatever that sense is. So if I, in my practice, this, over the last 25 years of doing accountability, when I say the truth, and or I say I'm afraid, I'm scared. Instead of talking about being scared, I drop into that feeling tone that I identify something that I can't really begin to describe. So, but it gets me headed inward, and I take a breath, and that feeling tone isn't just afraid. There's a constellation of, I don't want to say circumstances, events, choices, life that I come to be with. Well, come to be with who? Me in my terrified. not expecting myself to get out of it, not saying I'm stupid for being here or I'm weak, just experiencing the word fear. Does any word we use to describe an emotion does not come close to identifying the constellation of stuff going on internally, feeling tone, um, reframing. There's another word I'm looking for, validating, a whole constellation of events. This is where I'm at now. And when I take a deep breath and stay there, something comes to me about me and what I'm seeing, and I find relief. Um, I had an incident with my daughter where it was about buying an RV and miscommunication, and I went out and got this RV and pulled it up, and she goes, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm doing what we talked about. And I missed it. There's something wrong. She was like upset, and I couldn't figure it out. So I went home, and I had this tingling in my arms and this tightness in my chest. So I teach it. I said, well, go into it. And I'm thinking, oh shit, here we go. So I laid on my bed and I just noticed body sensation, tingling in my arms, tightness in my chest. And I had thoughts about it. Well, she said this and I said that. And she said, nice deep breath, tingling in my arms, tightness in my chest. And I just stayed with that frequency. And what came to me was, I'm afraid to actually feel alive. It had nothing to do with the RV. It was a setup. It was a good setup for me to get into the feeling. And that made sense to me because as a child, in the abuse that I received as an infant, toddler, young child, which included incest, ridicule, taunting, humiliation, based on somebody else's resentment, bitterness, contempt, had nothing to do with me. I took that on, and for me to express life became the enemy because when I did that, I would get attacked. So I subconsciously built this fear of anytime I had a feeling, oh, something's wrong, shut it down. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? What's the next step? What's right? What's wrong? I'd go into judgment and blame and lose the opportunity just to feel what was going on internally with me, whether it was traumatic or whether it was calm, whether I lost the connection. So my fear became of having any feeling whatsoever, which is my awareness that I'm alive. So I just took a deep breath. Dang, this is insidious. And I got it based on the trauma. This is the result. Yeah, it made sense. It hurt. It was sad. It was rife with feeling, tone, emotion. And then I said, it is my intent to live the adventure that is my life. And that intent in that feeling place, no word place, spacious place, went into my subconscious and does what subconscious does. It manifests. So now in that subconscious, along with the trauma and the trauma that I addressed, validated, and nurtured, which relieved that trauma. What happened to me still has had happened to me, but now my perception is that there was a nurturing element in it. I would be okay. I intend to live the adventure that is my life. Went in there, and I found myself different, open, willing to make mistakes, willing to own my mistakes and not have it be the end of the world, or I go into some kind of reactive mode where I got to get away from people, isolate, and then blame them for not listening to me or whatever the communication mishap was. So in the Tao Te Ching, It says, whatever name you give God isn't God. So here's my leap. Whatever name I give my feeling isn't my feeling. It's a sense and an immersion into a frequency, which frequency holds information. The lower somebody vibrates, the lower the capacity for, say, compassion. The higher somebody vibrates, the more capacity for compassion. What is that? Information, manifestation of higher frequency, lower frequency. So I've begun in my practice and in my groups assisting people to identify let's talk about, because that's all we got is words. We just have, I'm terrified. My husband was in an automobile accident. I'm terrified. Okay. Yes. Okay. So say I'm terrified, then drop into, there's no word place. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to change it. Don't judge it. Just be with it. And people will go in and go, I'm with a proactive something, because they see that they have power, that they're not powerless, that they have choice in there. And I'm doing my best to explain this, and it would probably take 20 or 30 more podcasts for us talking about the same thing to get some clarity around what is an emotion, what's a feeling. And I want to like recap. Emotion and feeling is the same thing. I'm receiving, I'm in a feeling place, frequency place that's rife with information that's subconscious. It's like I said to you at the beginning before our podcast, it's almost like I'm being spoken to telepathically. No words, but then I get an awareness. It's like, oh, I'm going to be okay. Oh, oh, I can do this now. Oh, I see where she misunderstood me. I see the nice deep breath. Nobody's bad. Nobody's wrong. There's simple miscommunication. We all may. And then I moved to proaction. One of the things I did was call my daughter and let her know what I had experienced, and she was grateful. Um, we still didn't keep the RV, but that wasn't the issue. So I'm gonna stop
There's
there.
a, yeah, I almost hate to stop you, but, or, and there's so much, there's such a rich treasure trove in what you just shared with us. And a couple of things pop out immediately that we're not going to have time to explore, but maybe we can pick it up next week. It's, I've been working with you for a long time. I've been working with you for a dozen years. So, I'm always learning something new. And this, one of the things that you raised for us here is the inexpressible value of staying present with the feeling, whatever's going on in, as I'm reacting to something that may feel like a threat coming from outside. I may be reacting towards about something that's causing me what we would call grief. I may be reacting to something, and my body is now has this built-in. You talked about in the brains, the limbic system, the midbrain. It's built in. We're emotional creatures. You often say we're biochemical, electric, magnetic creatures, and
Yep.
that's part
Mm-hmm.
of the biochemistry and the electromagnetism is that we give off these energetic vibrations, and the secretions in our blood or our nervous system are actually vibratory. I mean, you can
Yeah,
see
yeah,
that under a microscope if you could get one fine enough to
right.
watch the energy move from neuron to synapse. I mean, it's just all
Yep,
vibratory.
yep, yep,
Um, and we live, as you said also, and I'm going to elaborate on what you said. We live in a culture that's utterly verbal and it's mental. That is,
yep,
it's mind focused.
right.
And the mind is trained to communicate verbally through
Yep,
words, even though at depth, I've had this experience, and similar to what you were explaining, at depth, I can feel my mind processing without words. It's that you use the word telepathic, that begins to get at it. There's a reservoir of our mind that is below verbalness or
Yes.
verbosity.
Yes.
But and we're in an evolutionary part of the human experience that is right now we're just enamored of the mind. The
Yeah.
mind is like we became rational on a mass basis only 500 years ago.
Right.
Before that, we lived much more instinctively, much more emotionally, and now we have this new. It's like a new toy. Humanity found this new toy,
Yeah.
and even though in the book of Genesis, the very beginning, it says God gave Adam the power to name things, so that's what our minds do. They name things.
Right.
Oh, I'm feeling grief. But what I learned from you, and I want to extrapolate from what you shared a few minutes ago, is that when I'm doing the accountability practice and I find the emotional vibration, the minute I name it, I move away from being fully present with it.
Yes.
And when I move away from being fully present with the actual embodied experience, I lose the intensity and the power of the potential transformation or insight that staying with that feeling could otherwise give me.
Yes.
No blame or judgment.
No.
This has taken me years to appreciate. So I'm sharing this with people who might be listening to this for the first time. What are these guys talking about? What I'm talking about is that the power, the transformative power that we all have is in our bodies first. Our
Yeah.
minds are actually, I'm fond of saying, our minds are actually just commentators.
Right.
We have an experience and the mind goes, oh, here's what just happened.
Yep.
And you can't not do that, friends. You cannot not have your mind do that. That's what it's designed to do, and we all have minds, so they're going to do that.
Right.
And however, we can train ourselves to suspend paying attention to what the mind says for even a split second,
Yep.
so that you use the word in your share and also with me before we got online about dropping into. It's the verb you said, just drop into the feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it's because for most of us, these primary experiences are in our gut.
Yep.
I mean, they can be other places. We can have energy in our faces. Some people get it in the back of their hands or the back of their necks. Some people get it in their thighs.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily we get it in our gut. And it turns out that the gut is actually designed to do this.
Yeah.
There's actually a powerful nervous connection between the guts and the brain, but
Yeah.
we don't have time for the physiology lesson here.
Yeah.
But the point I want to make, and maybe we can pick this up next week, is that the power comes from training ourselves to just be present with the emotional energetics that are going on and do our best to ignore, even just for a split second, what our mind wants to do. So our mind's like, oh, I have the answer. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I like
Thanks.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. But let's just, we can come to that in a second to stay with it. In the exercise that you and I did before we came on, you helped me settle into, I was having an experience that was showing up as a heaviness in my gut. And I just simply, in my mind, in my mental process, I simply asked that feeling in my gut to tell me what it wanted me to know.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it said, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, I promise you, John, I did not anticipate that
Right.
in my mental process. Oh, what's going to happen? No, it's just so the value of learning to just be with that experience, the vibration, the feeling tone is that there's such wisdom available to us when we train ourselves to do that.
Yeah.
Um, as we come to the end of our time together, I want to just let everybody know that John and I both facilitate accountability practice meetings where we help ourselves, first of all, we help others have this experience.
Yeah.
So we're facilitators or coaches, whatever word you want, and we help people do, manage this process of letting go of the thought, let it sit, setting aside, and just drop in the feeling. And usually we do it by just asking questions of what do you notice?
Hmm.
And in order for me to answer that question, what do I notice? I have to pay attention.
Right.
So the paying
Yes.
attention is again, we there's so much here, but this is the beginning of the accountability tree process is to pay attention and get myself in present with what's really going on in my body in the moment. That's the key to something else. And we're going
Right.
to have to leave it there. We'll pick it up next week as to what that something else is, how that key works, and so forth.
Okay.
So
Yes, sir.
before we wrap it up, any last thoughts, John? I know I went on there a little bit.
That's good. I like the way I hear myself say what I say and then get the feedback from you. It helps put other things in context that I wouldn't be able to do by myself. So,
I had the same experience.
uh,
So as we wrap up, friends, if you're interested in attending one of our accountability practice meetings, they're all online on Zoom, and information as to the time, days, and the URLs, Zoom room addresses will all be at the end of the podcast. So please feel free to check them out. Come join us and uh, see what you might experience of your own feelings and what they might teach you.
very good.
And so with that, we're going to say goodbye and pick it up next week. Thanks,
Okay. All
John.
right. Thank you. Thank you, Marty.
You bet. Bye.